Newt Gingrich would send US Marshals to arrest activist judges. This is an incredible new idea from potential Republican presidential nominee and possible president of the United States, Newt Gingrich. He is continuing this kind of crusade against the courts. He says that there are judges who are dedicated to imposing secularism on the country, and it wouldn't be outrageous to just go arrest those judges. Here's what he had to say to Bob Schieffer, and this is really just a continuing disregard for the Constitution, continuing disregard for sanity, logic, and reason, and many of the other tenets that we would hope would be ascribed to a potential president. Those are missing. Here's a little bit of that clip.
The things you say is that if you don't like what a court has done, that Congress should subpoena the judge and bring him before Congress and hold a congressional hearing. Some people say that's unconstitutional, but I'll let that go for a minute. I just want to ask you from a practical standpoint, how would you enforce that? Would you send the Capitol Police down to arrest him?
If you had to. Or you'd instruct the Justice Department to send a U.S. Marshal. But let's take the case of Judge Beery. I think he should be...
Right. So if you have to send the Capitol Police to arrest judges that you believe are imposing secularism, then...
Let's talk about the judges that are imposing theism.
Right. You know, that's the other question. We don't need anybody for those. We don't need Capitol Police. We don't need the U.S. Marshals.
If a judge sentences you to go to church every Sunday for a few years, that's fine.
I thought Newt Gingrich was against Sharia law or anything resembling it, but isn't this his version of Sharia law? Is this not Newt Gingrich suggesting if you do something in a court, if you rule in a way that is not to my liking, I'll overrule it and I will arrest the judge that made the ruling. I mean, this is it's completely un-American. It's completely against the Constitution Newt Gingrich claims to be so enamored with.
This is just, the GOP primary has just become
a circus,
a competition to see who is the most religious. And I'm serious.
This isn't a religious thing, though.
In a way, it is. Indirectly.
Well, right, imposing secularism. But
yeah, you're fighting. He's fighting the people that are imposing secularism.
The absence
He's pushing
of
his Christian agenda. Quote. But I mean, isn't this whole race just a competition to see who can be more Christian?
It is becoming that, and poor Newt keeps forgetting about that First Amendment and its quintessential job of separating church and state, which he really, really seems to hate. He doesn't seem to like that separation. We've heard more jarring comments from presidential candidates, but have we actually heard anything more ridiculous when we look at legal precedent, which is not existent for this, by the way, and conflict with the established system of laws in this country? This could be, it's definitely in the top 5 most ridiculous claims or ideas by any presidential candidate.
It's pretty bad, and I guarantee you after the primary, things will be a lot less religious. To decide who's president.
I don't know about that. Because
it'll be there. It just
Obama is going to be cast as the non-religious guy. So in the absence, in exchange for that, the Republican candidate is going to be posed up there as the religious candidate.
Well, that's fine, but in the primary, the vast majority of people voting for you care about that. In the presidential election, it's a much smaller number, percentage-wise.
The other thing that's irritating me about Newt Gingrich is he's kind of being depicted falsely as this kind of professorial historian. Here's a clip from the Sean Hannity show with a perfect example of this.
About the issue, it was funny. I think he joked about, zany, I'm editing, I'm using mild words, and then he used some very tough words here, that it was mindless, especially, and irrational, the president's policy. I believe at that point it was on energy. Obviously, responding to Mitt Romney. When he's on stage, and obviously he's risen to the polls because of these debates, when he's on stage, does he counter that argument, that narrative that his opponents are trying to advance on him?
Absolutely. When he's playing the historian, that's why he went from 4% in the polls up to over 30%.
Right. All of a sudden, Newt Gingrich becomes the historian, and he goes from 4 to 30%. Oh, hold on a second, Lewis. I thought the Republicans didn't like the elitist professorial types like Obama. Historian sounds pretty smart and pretty professorial to me. How is that what's helping him in the polls? That doesn't make any sense to me.
I don't know. You'd have to ask that pollster who was talking about it, but I mean, how is anyone convinced that the people running right now are not elites at all? They all are.
A lot of people do understand that. I really do think a lot of people do understand that, and they're just picking who they think is the least bad of all of them. But there's just so many conflicting narratives, and this is just one of those perfect examples. I mean, a historian, because he's being a historian, he's rocketing in the polls. Obama was a law professor, and that was bad. He was an elite because he was a law professor. He was too verbose. John Kerry, look at that, same thing. His nuance and his vocabulary disqualified him in the eyes of some to be president of the United States. But with Newt Gingrich, all of a sudden it's an asset? I don't get it.
Very strange.